Welcome back to Horror Drift Stories. Before we begin tonight's journey into the dark, feel free to share in the comments where you're listening from. I genuinely enjoy reading them. Now settle in and let the world fade away. Story 1. It began in a way that was so small I almost ignored it. The first time it happened, the time skipped 15 minutes right in front of me. I wasn't tired. I wasn't dizzy. I hadn't been staring at the screen for hours until my eyes blurred. I was working like normal, sitting at my desk with my computer open. The kind of day where you keep telling yourself you'll take a break in a minute, and then you never do. I glanced down at the clock on my monitor. It said 2:32. I remember it clearly, because I was thinking about how I needed to send an email before 2:45, and I was annoyed that I was already running behind. I looked away for what felt like a couple seconds. I reached toward my mug, took a sip, and then looked back at the screen. 2:47. My stomach dropped, as if I'd missed a step on a staircase. The time change was so clean and so immediate that my brain refused to accept it at first. I stared at it, waiting for it to flicker or correct itself, like a glitch. It didn't. I clicked around, panicking quietly. I checked my sent emails. I checked my open documents. I checked the revision history on a file I'd been editing. I expected to find signs of myself doing things for 15 minutes without realizing it, like a sleepwalker. There was nothing. No new messages. No extra edits. No files moved. No weird gaps in my browsing history. Just the same work sitting there, waiting for me, like time had jumped and left everything else behind. I sat back and tried to laugh it off. I told myself I must have blanked out. People do that, right? A tiny blackout, a micro nap, a brain hiccup. I promised myself I would drink more water and stop staring at a screen for so long. Then it happened again. Not right away, but throughout the week, in ways that were harder to explain. It was like my life kept getting edited, like someone was cutting out pieces and splicing the film back together. One evening, I was unloading groceries from my car. I remember opening the trunk and grabbing the first bag. I remember the cool air on my face and the sound of traffic in the distance. I remember thinking I needed to hurry because the frozen stuff was in the back. Then, nothing. The next thing I knew, I was standing in my kitchen with the refrigerator door open, placing the last item on the shelf. The bags were gone. The counter was clear. The trunk, I later checked, was empty. I stood there, staring at the milk in my hand, feeling like I had woken up inside a scene I hadn't lived through. Another day, I picked up a laundry basket that I knew I had just cleaned. I remember folding a towel and thinking I should vacuum the living room too. Then I walked into my bedroom and saw the basket sitting there, filled with dirty clothes again, damp socks and shirts that smelled like sweat. It was as if the washing never happened, or as if it happened and then got undone. I started keeping mental notes, trying to catch myself. I watched the clocks. I checked my phone. I left little markers, an object on a certain corner of the desk, a sticky note on the fridge, just to prove I wasn't drifting into long blackouts without noticing. But the skips weren't always long enough to leave obvious evidence, and that made it worse. It wasn't like losing hours and waking up in another city. It was little cuts, little missing pieces, 15 minutes here, 10 minutes there, just enough to keep me off balance. I thought about seeing someone, a doctor, a psychologist, anyone who could tell me I was stressed and exhausted, and imagining it. But I was slammed at work, and I didn't want to admit anything. I didn't want a note on my record. I didn't want people whispering that I was unstable. So I did what I always do when something scares me. I tried to act normal. Then, I got the email about the basement files. It came from someone higher up, the kind of person who doesn't ask, just tells. He wrote that we needed files from storage for an upcoming project and that they had to be retrieved today. I replied politely and mentioned I was buried in deadlines, hoping that would buy me time. It didn't. He responded almost immediately, basically saying in corporate language that my excuses were not his problem. I stared at the email for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. All I could think was that going down into the basement, alone, while my brain was doing whatever it was doing, felt like walking into a trap. But if I didn't go, I'd have to explain why. And I didn't have a good explanation that wouldn't get me questioned. So I went. I checked my watch the moment I stood up from my desk. 1:14 p.m. I walked to the stairwell door and pulled it open. The air in the staircase was cooler, and my footsteps echoed down the concrete steps louder than they should have. I checked my watch again as I started down. 1:15 p.m., 2 stories down. I reached the corridor that led toward the basement elevator. The hallway lights flickered slightly, the way old fluorescent bulbs do when they're near the end of their life. I tried to focus on normal things, the smell of dust, the hum of the lights, the scuff marks on the linoleum. I pressed the elevator button. The doors opened with a soft ding. I stepped inside. 1:17 p.m. The elevator started descending, and that's when the air changed. A pressure built behind my eyes, like something was squeezing the inside of my skull. My body felt heavier, as if gravity had quietly increased. It wasn't panic. It was physical, like the air itself had thickened into something dense. The ceiling light flickered. Once, twice. I grabbed the railing with my right hand and tried to breathe through it. "You're better than this," I told myself. "Don't let this episode control you. Not now." I looked at my watch for reassurance. 1:18 p.m. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. I looked up at the floor display. B3. That didn't make sense. Our building had 2 basement levels, B1 and B2, storage and maintenance. That was it. There wasn't supposed to be a third. For a second, I thought the display had glitched. Then, I stepped out. The room was a medium-sized storage area filled with filing cabinets and shelves, scattered in loose rows like someone had rearranged them without a plan. Corridors branched out from each wall, leading into darker stretches that looked too long for the building's layout. As soon as my feet hit the floor, the pressure in my head spiked. It wasn't gradual. It hit like a wave. My vision blurred. A bright flash pulsed across my sight. It felt like my brain was trying to fold in on itself. The pain was so intense I honestly thought my skull was going to split. Then the nausea came. It hit hard, and my body responded before I could think. I doubled over and threw up thick yellow-green fluid that tasted like bile and something metallic. My knees shook. My hands trembled. For a brief moment, the pain eased enough for me to think again. Cabinet 36B, I told myself. You need to go to 36B. I repeated it like a prayer as I stumbled forward. Each step brought another sharp flash of pain and brightness. The room seemed to shift in the corners of my vision, like it was sliding out of place when I wasn't looking directly at it. I tried to focus on the cabinet numbers as I moved past row after row, but the farther I went, the more my eyes refused to lock onto details. The numbers blurred. My head throbbed. My stomach lurched. It felt like the room didn't want me there. After what felt like a long time, I reached a cabinet that looked like it had a number in the 30s. That was good enough. I couldn't keep going like this. My legs were ready to buckle. I fumbled for the handle, pulling the drawer open. And the moment I did, the pain spiked again, so hard my body gave out. I collapsed to the floor, gripping the cabinet so tightly my fingers went numb. My eyes squeezed shut, and I couldn't force them open. I lay there for a moment, trying to breathe, trying not to pass out. The pressure behind my eyes was unbearable. My skull felt too small for what was happening inside it. When I could move again, I reached into the drawer blindly. I expected paper, folders, something flat. Instead, my hand touched something round. A cylinder. It felt rough in some places and smooth in others, like metal with worn patches. It didn't feel like any office item I could name. I gathered every ounce of strength I had and lifted it out. And then I was back at my desk. Just like that. No transition, no fade, no sense of moving. I was sitting upright, hands on my keyboard, halfway through typing an email to my coworker John. My heart slammed in my chest. My breath caught. The pain was gone. The nausea was gone. My mouth didn't taste like bile. My hands weren't shaking. I looked down at the bottom right corner of my monitor. 1:14 p.m. Not 1:19. Not 1:25. 1:14. The exact time I had stood up from my desk. I stared at the clock. And then I stared at my watch. And then I checked my phone. All of them agreed. It was as if the basement never happened. But I remembered it. I remembered the pressure, the flashes, the vomit, the cabinet handle biting into my fingers, the cylinder in my hand. And something else was wrong too. Something I noticed only after I sat there long enough to calm down. My email to John was open, but the sentence I was typing didn't make sense. It wasn't gibberish, but it was written like someone else had started it. Like the tone wasn't quite mine. I forced myself to finish the workday as if nothing had happened. That was the rule I lived by. If you can pretend it's normal, maybe it will become normal. Maybe your brain will settle. Maybe this is just a weird phase. I kept checking the time every few minutes. The clock behaved normally. Minutes passed the way they were supposed to. Nothing skipped. Nothing jumped. At 5 p.m., I didn't hesitate. I packed my things and left the building like it was on fire. In the parking lot, I tried to breathe. I tried to let the daylight and the presence of other people convince me I was safe. Other coworkers walked to their cars. Some chatted casually. Some stared at their phones. Everything looked normal. Then I glanced back at the rear exit of the building. A man stood against the wall in a dark suit, half in shadow, narrow frame, short hair, still as a statue. I told myself it was just someone waiting, a late meeting. Security, a contractor. I drove home. I thought the worst part of the day was over. I was wrong. When I turned onto my street, I saw the lights of my apartment building through the trees. I parked, got out, and glanced up toward my unit out of habit. And there, through my kitchen window, I saw myself cooking dinner. Not like some weird out-of-body perspective. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't watching a memory. I was standing outside. And inside my apartment, a man who looked exactly like me was at the stove, making the chicken stir-fry I cooked most nights. The way he moved was familiar. The way he shifted the pan. The way he reached for the seasonings. It was like watching a recording of myself from a normal evening. My legs went cold. My hands tightened around my keys. For a second, my brain tried to do what it always does. Rationalize. Deny. Rewrite. You're tired. You're seeing things. Glass reflections do weird stuff. But it wasn't a reflection. He was too clear. I unlocked my door and went in. He didn't disappear. He didn't even look up. He just kept cooking, shaking the pan slightly, as if I didn't exist. "What are you doing in my apartment?" I asked. My voice came out quieter than I meant it to. My throat felt tight. "What are you doing in my apartment right now?" He added, seasoning without looking at me. "Listen," I said, forcing some firmness into my voice. "If you don't get out, I'm calling the police." I pulled out my phone and started dialing, stopping with my thumb over the last number like I was proving I could finish it. He pulled out a plate. He served himself. That's when my fear turned into anger. Pure, hot anger. The kind that rises because you can't handle feeling helpless anymore. "Stop this," I snapped. "Put the plate down. Get out. I don't know why you look like me, but if you don't leave, I'm calling the authorities. And if they don't come, I'll handle you myself." I grabbed a kitchen knife. My hands were shaking, but my grip was tight. He didn't flinch, didn't react. He placed the plate on the counter, then walked calmly toward the front door. He stepped out. I rushed to the doorway to see where he went. The hallway was empty. It was like he had vanished the moment he left my line of sight. I locked the door. I put the knife down. I stood there breathing hard, trying not to fall apart. Then I called work. I told them I'd missed the staff meeting the next morning. Family emergency. Something vague. They accepted it easily. Too easily. After that, I called a psychologist, Dr. Eric Weston. I'd only heard of him because of a conversation at work. Someone mentioned a relative who lost his grip and how this doctor handled delusional patients without immediately throwing them into a hospital system. That sounded like exactly what I needed. The receptionist told me he was booked for weeks. Then I mentioned the basement, the time skips, the duplicate. The pause on the line was long enough to make my skin prickle. She gave me an appointment for the next morning. I drove to the strip mall early and sat in my car watching the storefronts. Most of them looked tired. Some were abandoned. Some had faded signs and dark windows. Dr. Weston's office looked different, cleaner, brighter. No stains on the front, no peeling paint. Inside, the receptionist smiled like everything was normal. When my name was called, I followed her into an office with soft lighting and a calm smell, like someone had tried very hard to make it feel safe. Dr. Weston was taller than me, with a slim frame. He had short brown hair with a few gray strands. Mid-40s, maybe. He gestured to a cushioned chair. "Hello," he said calmly. "How have you been feeling lately?" "Not great," I admitted. "I want this to stop." He nodded and asked me to explain everything from the beginning. So I did. I talked for almost half an hour, telling him about the skip time, the missing moments, the basement, the pain, the cylinder, and then the duplicate in my apartment. He listened without interrupting, but toward the end, his expression changed. It wasn't just concern. It looked like fear that he was trying to hide. When I finished, he didn't ask me about stress or sleep. He asked, "What did the object look like?" "What object?" I said. "The object you took from the filing cabinet," he said quickly. "What did it look like?" "I don't know," I said. "I couldn't see. I was in too much pain." "Did it feel heavy?" he pressed. "Did it make any sound? Did the shift happen immediately after you touched it?" His questions came fast, almost desperate. Something inside me snapped. "Why do you need to know that?" I demanded. "I'm telling you I'm losing my mind and you're obsessed with some random thing I touched?" His face went still. He took a slow breath, and the desperation disappeared, replaced with forced calm. "I'm sorry," he said. "I can't give you a diagnosis at the moment. I need to review my notes. These episodes should not escalate." But if they do, call me." I stared at him, stunned by how quickly the conversation ended. As I walked out, I swear I heard him whisper under his breath, "Lock your doors. Lock your doors." I didn't even process it at the time. I was too used to weird things, too used to not trusting my own senses. That day, nothing happened at work. No time skips. No headaches. No flashes. I almost convinced myself it was over. Then, I came home. The moment I stepped up to my apartment door, I felt it. That same wrong heaviness in the air, like the space inside didn't belong to me anymore. I opened the door. He was sitting at my dining table, eating the stir-fry he never got to finish the night before. Pans and utensils were scattered around him, placed in positions that were close to mine, but not quite. Like a mimic who didn't understand the small habits that make a routine yours. I stood frozen in the doorway, keys still in my hand, heart thudding. I told myself to ignore him. If he was a hallucination, maybe starving it of attention would make it fade. I walked to the freezer, grabbed a microwave dinner, and acted like he wasn't there. The microwave hummed. 30 seconds before it finished, the duplicate twisted its neck toward me in a way that didn't look human. Too far, too smooth. The movement made my stomach turn. It locked eyes with me. Then it spoke. "Get out. Right now," it said, using my exact tone from the night before. "What are you currently doing in my apartment right now?" My mouth went dry. I didn't answer. "Don't make me do it," it said. I kept my eyes on the microwave display, trying to keep my breathing steady. Then it started repeating things I had said. Not just what I'd said to it. Things I'd said to coworkers. Things I'd muttered when I thought I was alone. Pieces of the conversation I'd had in Dr. Weston's office. It knew my words. It knew my voice. When it finally ran out of phrases, it stopped for a moment, as if thinking. Then it said softly, "You're a screw-up, aren't you?" I looked at it without meaning to. It stared back with that neutral expression, like it was watching a screen. "You are worthless," it said. "No one cares about you. You will lose your mind. You will be locked away. Everyone will forget you." My hands clenched so hard my fingernails dug into my palms. I hated that the words hurt. I hated that something wearing my face could say them like it knew exactly where to cut. "You can't get rid of me," it continued. "You have no control. You will never have control." "Shut up," I shouted. The outburst made it stop speaking. I grabbed the knife again, not as a warning this time. My anger felt sharp and ugly, like a blanket thrown over my fear. "Get out of my head," I said through my teeth, "or I will kill you. Do you understand?" It stood up, still calm, still neutral. I lunged. It moved faster than it should have. One quick motion, and its fist slammed into my chest. I felt myself fly backward, pain exploding across my ribs as I hit the wall. Something cracked. I couldn't even breathe properly. Before I could recover, it walked over and kicked me in the stomach so hard my vision filled with stars. I collapsed on my side, gasping, coughing, trying to pull air into lungs that refused to work right. The knife lay on the floor a few feet away. It lifted its foot again. Some desperate part of me fired off one clear thought: move. I twisted my legs away, and its kick hit the wall instead. Its foot broke through the drywall with a loud crack. While it struggled to pull itself free, I grabbed the knife and forced myself to stand, shaking with pain. It turned toward me, and the look on its face is something I still can't forget. It wasn't rage. It wasn't fear. It was empty. A blank, flat expression like it didn't care if I lived or died. Like I was an inconvenience, not a person. It rushed at me again. I threw the knife. It hit its shoulder, and the sound it made was wrong, like a shriek that held both a high and low pitch at the same time. I ran down the hallway and slammed my bedroom door. I shoved my desk chair against it as a barricade. A series of thuds hit the door, evenly spaced. No yelling, no snarling, just steady impacts, like a machine. I didn't wait. I opened my window, climbed out onto the fire escape, and scrambled down. When I hit the alley, pain surged through my abdomen, and I threw up again, stumbling forward, dizzy, desperate to get somewhere with people. Headlights flared in front of me. A black car with tinted windows rolled to a stop. The driver's door opened. "Doctor," Weston stepped out. "Get in the car," he said in the same calm professional tone, but there was urgency under it. Above us, I heard crashing inside my apartment. I didn't argue. I got in. The car sped off. "Why are you here?" I demanded. "How did you know?" "Your session gave me most of what I needed," he said. "What does that even mean?" He glanced at me briefly, then back to the road. "You've been experiencing anomalies," he said. "Things that are supposed to stay hidden, but don't. The point of instability is beneath your office. You went down there. Whatever you did made it worse." "So I'm not hallucinating," I said, voice shaking. "Everyone hallucinates sometimes," he said sharply, then softened. "But that's not the point. The anomaly has expanded beyond the building. You have to fix it." As he spoke, I recognized the route. We were heading back. "No," I said immediately. "We are not going back there." That basement almost killed me. "If we could send someone else, we would," he replied. "But the fact I'm driving you means only the source of escalation can close it." I sat rigid, watching familiar buildings slide past, wondering if I should jump out at the next red light and run. He spoke again, quieter. "If you don't do this, people will die." That was the sentence that trapped me. I didn't want to believe him, but I couldn't shake the image of that blank-faced thing, wearing my skin, moving through the city if it got loose. "Fine," I said, "but answer me first. How can a duplicate of me exist? How can a metal canister threaten an entire city?" His jaw tightened. "I'm not allowed to tell you much," he said. "But 5 years ago, the stability of the world started breaking in ways we didn't anticipate. This isn't the first incident." That was all he gave me. Then the car turned into the office parking lot and stopped near the entrance. The building looked normal from the outside. Too normal. I got out. The lobby was empty. No security, no staff, no reception. Someone had cleared the place out. The power was still on, though. The elevator still worked. I stepped inside, and as the doors closed, a strange calm settled over me. Either this ends, I thought, or I do. The lights flickered. The old pressure rose in my skull, but it wasn't as overwhelming as the first time. I held on, breathing through it. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. Instead of the storage room, there was a long, narrow corridor with concrete floors and fluorescent lights, spaced evenly overhead. I walked forward. The farther I went, the worse the pain got. The hallway went on and on, longer than it should have. Doors appeared at intervals, but most were locked. Some opened into tiny closets. After minutes of this, I heard a screech behind me. I turned. There it was. My duplicate stood down the hallway, but it was taller now, stretched upward until its head nearly touched the lights. It stared with that same neutral face. Then it sprinted. I ran. My legs felt like pistons, moving on pure survival. I focused on the end of the hallway where a doorway waited like a finish line. Footsteps thundered behind me. Too fast, too heavy. My head throbbed. My lungs burned. My vision blurred. My leg gave out. I hit the concrete hard. Before I could stand, it grabbed my jacket and threw me against the wall. My chin slammed into the surface. Blood filled my mouth. It leaned close. Its body was wrong now. Longer limbs, pale skin, greenish veins showing under it. Like something had taken my shape and pulled it until it almost snapped. It shoved me again. The pain in my skull flashed white as it drew back to strike again. I shoved my hand into my jacket pocket and drove a small pocket knife into its wrist. Its blood spilled out, not red, but oily black, like thick ink. It shrieked and staggered, but it didn't stop. I stumbled toward the doorway ahead, barely able to move, the pain rising with every step. It gained on me. I grabbed the door handle. A cold, wet hand yanked me back. I tore out of my jacket and threw myself forward through the doorway, slamming the door behind me. Its arm shot through the gap, thrashing wildly. I shoved the door closed with all my strength, feeling flesh crush and bone crack as the door finally latched. The arm went limp. The screeching continued on the other side. I turned, breathing hard, and looked around. Filing cabinets, rows of them. The pain in my skull spiked in certain corners, as if the room had hot spots. Then I saw it. On the floor. The cylinder. The more I tried to focus on it, the blurrier it became, like my eyes refused to see it clearly. The door behind me burst open. The duplicate came in, its ruined arm hanging in shredded strips, and it charged. It tackled me to the ground. I fought to breathe. My ribs screamed. It pinned me down, lifted its good arm, and stabbed downward. Its hand drove into my back, and strangely, the skull pain became almost distant. I clenched my jaw, forced a knee into its stomach, and it rolled aside with a shriek. I crawled toward the cylinder. My leg was grabbed, yanked. I clawed at the floor, grabbed the base of a cabinet. The yanks grew stronger. Then my hip popped. Pain burst through me so hard I almost blacked out. I screamed and kicked at it with my good leg, making it fall back again. I looked up and saw cabinet 36B only a few feet away. Now or never. I pulled at the cabinet, tipping it with everything I had left. It leaned, hesitated, then fell. For one terrible second, I thought it would crush me too. I twisted away at the last moment. The cabinet slammed down, and muffled screams rose from underneath it. I dragged myself forward and grabbed the cylinder. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. Behind me, the cabinet lifted, actually lifted, like gravity didn't matter anymore. The duplicate rose, eyes bloodshot now, rage finally breaking through that blank face. I crawled to cabinet 36B and pulled it open. A cold foot pressed into my back. I shoved the cylinder inside with one clean motion. There was a click, a blinding flash of white. The duplicate shrieked like a wire snapping. And then I was back at my desk. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like they always had. My email to John was half written. My hands were on the keyboard. I patted my torso, my leg. No injuries, no blood, no pain. My eyes drifted to the corner of my monitor. 1:17 p.m. I never saw Dr. Weston again. When I went looking for his office later, the strip mall storefront was abandoned, covered in graffiti, like it had been empty for years. No sign, No clean glass. No receptionist. Nothing. The time skip stopped after that. Everything felt normal. At first, I was relieved. I thought it was over. But as I got out of my car and looked up at my apartment window, I saw a figure inside, washing dishes at my sink, moving with my familiar rhythm, wearing my face like it belonged to him. And this time, he turned his head slowly, as if he'd been waiting for me to notice. And he smiled like he finally had control. Story 2. I first realized something was seriously wrong when time skipped 15 minutes right in front of me. It wasn't like I fell asleep. I didn't feel dizzy. I didn't black out. There was no warning at all. 1 second, I was staring at my computer monitor, and it said 2:32 p.m. I remember it clearly because I was thinking about how I needed to send an email before 2:45. I glanced away for what felt like maybe 2 or 3 seconds, just long enough to stretch my neck. When I looked back at the screen, it said 2:47. My stomach dropped instantly. There was no way 15 minutes had passed. I hadn't moved. I hadn't left my chair. I hadn't even finished the thought in my head. My heart started beating faster as I checked everything I could think of. I opened my email to see if I had sent anything. I checked the document I was working on to see if I had typed more without realizing it. Nothing had changed. There were no new messages, no extra edits, no signs that I had done anything during those missing 15 minutes. That should have been impossible. I tried to calm myself down. I told myself it must have been a tiny blackout. Maybe stress. Maybe I was more exhausted than I thought. People zone out all the time, right? But then it kept happening. Throughout that entire week, small pieces of time just vanished. One evening, I was unloading groceries from my car. I clearly remember grabbing the first bag from the trunk. I remember thinking I needed to hurry so the frozen food wouldn't melt. Then suddenly I was standing in my kitchen, placing the last item into the fridge. All the bags were gone. Everything was put away. I had no memory of walking upstairs. No memory of unlocking my door. Nothing. Another time, I finished doing laundry. I folded everything and placed it neatly in the basket. Later that same day, I walked into my bedroom and saw the basket full of dirty clothes again. Socks I was sure I had washed were back, stained and smelling like sweat. It felt like reality was editing itself. Of course, I started thinking I was losing my mind. But I was busy with work, deadlines piling up, meetings every other hour. I didn't want to deal with a psychologist. I didn't want to admit something might be seriously wrong with me. Then came the basement. I received an email from one of the higher-ups saying I needed to retrieve some files from storage for a new project. I replied that I was swamped and asked if someone else could handle it. He didn't accept my excuse. So I did the worst possible thing someone with memory problems could do. I went down there alone. I checked my watch the moment I stood up from my desk. 1:14 p.m. I opened the stairwell door and walked down 2 floors. My footsteps echoed louder than they should have, bouncing off the concrete walls. I glanced at my watch again. 1:15 p.m. I followed the corridor that led to the basement elevator. The hallway felt colder than usual. I pressed the button. The doors opened almost immediately. I stepped inside. 1:17 p.m. That was when everything changed. As the elevator started descending, a heavy pressure built in my head. It felt like someone was squeezing my brain from the inside. The air felt thick, almost sticky, like it was harder to breathe. The ceiling light flickered. Once, twice, I grabbed the railing to steady myself. "You're fine," I whispered to myself. "Don't let this episode take over." I checked my watch again. 1:18 p.m. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. I looked at the display panel. B3. That made no sense. Our building only had 2 basement levels, B1 and B2. There was no B3. For a second, I thought it was a glitch. But when I stepped out, I saw a room filled with filing cabinets and shelves arranged in messy rows. Corridors stretched out from each wall, disappearing into shadow. As soon as my feet touched the floor, the pressure in my head exploded. My vision blurred. A bright white flash filled my sight. The pain was so intense it felt like my skull was about to split open. I honestly thought my head might burst. Then nausea hit me hard. I doubled over and vomited. Thick yellow-green liquid splashed onto the concrete floor. My entire body trembled. For a few seconds, I managed to hold on to reality. I forced myself to focus. Cabinet 36B. That was what I needed. I repeated it over and over in my head, like it was the only thing keeping me alive. With every step forward, the pain stabbed deeper. Bright flashes appeared in my vision. My balance was failing. After what felt like forever, I reached a cabinet in the 30s. I couldn't see clearly anymore, but it was close enough. I grabbed the handle and pulled it open. The pain spiked even worse. My legs gave out, and I collapsed, gripping the cabinet so tightly my fingers went numb. My eyes squeezed shut. I couldn't open them even if I wanted to. I reached blindly inside. I expected paper, folders. Instead, my hand touched something round, a cylinder. It felt metallic, smooth in some places, rough in others. It didn't feel like office equipment at all. I used every ounce of strength I had left to lift it out. And then I was back at my desk. Midway through typing an email to John, the pain was gone, completely gone. No nausea, no headache. My breathing was normal. Slowly, my eyes moved to the bottom right corner of my monitor, 1:14 p.m., the exact time I had left my desk. It was like nothing had happened, but I remembered everything. I forced myself to finish the workday normally. I kept checking the time every few minutes, but it moved steadily and correctly. No more jumps. At 5 p.m., I grabbed my bag and left immediately. As I walked through the parking lot, I felt paranoid. I kept scanning the area, expecting something strange. But everything looked normal. Until I saw him. Near the back exit of the building, a man in a dark suit stood against the wall. He was thin with short hair. He wasn't moving. I told myself he was just waiting for someone, maybe a late meeting. I drove home. I thought things couldn't get worse. They did. When I pulled into my apartment complex and got out of my car, I glanced up at my kitchen window, and I saw myself cooking. Not in some reflection, not a shadow. I was standing outside, inside my apartment. A man who looked exactly like me was at the stove, cooking chicken stir-fry. The same recipe I made almost every night. I froze. I told myself I was hallucinating. I unlocked my door and walked in. He didn't disappear. He didn't react at all. He just kept cooking, shaking the pan like it was any other evening. "What are you doing in my apartment?" I asked quietly. My voice shook. "What are you doing in my apartment right now?" He didn't look up. "Get out," I said, pulling out my phone. "I'll call the police." I dialed 911 and held the screen toward him. "Get out right now," I said through my teeth. He calmly grabbed a plate and served himself. That's when I lost control. I screamed at him. I grabbed a kitchen knife. I threatened him. He didn't care. He placed the plate on the counter, walked toward the door, stepped outside, and vanished. The hallway was empty. That night, I called in sick to work. Then, I called a psychologist, Dr. Eric Weston. I had heard about him from a coworker. Supposedly, he treated patients who had severe delusions without immediately committing them. The receptionist told me he was fully booked. But when I mentioned the basement and seeing a duplicate of myself, I got an appointment the next morning. His office was in a small strip mall. Most of the surrounding stores looked abandoned, but his office looked clean and maintained. He was calm, professional, mid-40s, soft voice. I told him everything. When I finished describing the basement and the cylinder, his expression changed. "What did the object look like?" he asked. "What object?" I replied. "The one in the filing cabinet." I told him I couldn't see it clearly. The pain was too intense. He asked if I remembered its texture, if it made noise, if everything reset immediately after I touched it. He sounded desperate. When I got angry and asked why he cared more about that object than my mental state, he pulled back. He said he couldn't diagnose me yet, said he would contact me soon. As I left, I thought I heard him whisper, "Lock your doors." It sat at my table, eating stir-fry. I tried to ignore it. Then it twisted its neck unnaturally far and stared at me. It began repeating things I had said before, things I had said at work, things I had said in therapy. Then it started insulting me. "You're worthless. You'll lose your mind. No one will remember you." I snapped again. I grabbed the knife. This time, it fought back. It punched me so hard I flew across the room. It moved faster than I could react. Its strength was unreal. I stabbed it in the shoulder. Black, oily blood spilled out. I ran and locked myself in my bedroom. It pounded on the door evenly, like a machine. I escaped through the window and ran into the alley. A black car stopped in front of me. Dr. Weston stepped out. "Get in," he said urgently. He told me I was experiencing anomalies, that something under my office had become unstable, that I had made it worse by touching it. He drove me back to the building. He said only I could fix it. The office was empty when I entered. The elevator took me down. The hallway below was longer than it should have been. The duplicate chased me there too, but it was taller now, stretched and pale. We fought. I stabbed it again. Black blood everywhere. I crawled toward the cylinder. My leg dislocated when it yanked me back. I pulled a cabinet down on it. I dragged myself to cabinet 36B. With everything I had left, I shoved the cylinder inside. There was a click, a blinding white flash, and then I was back at my desk. 1:17 p.m. Everything after my first basement visit had been erased. Dr. Weston's office no longer existed. The storefront was abandoned, covered in graffiti. The time skips stopped. Everything seemed normal again. I should have felt relieved, but when I got out of my car that evening and looked up at my apartment window, I saw him again, a man with my face, washing dishes. And this time, he looked straight at me and smiled. Story 3. It was 8 a.m. on a Monday, the kind of Monday that feels like it's already been going for 3 days. Comparative physiology. If you've ever taken a class like that, you know the vibe. The lights are too bright, the air is too warm, and half the room looks like they got dressed in the dark while still asleep. People were slumped over their notebooks, mouths slightly open, heads nodding. A few students had hoodies pulled up like shields. The professor, Davis, stood at the front with the same tired face he always had, like he'd been awake for a week and had stopped caring who knew it. He was talking about sleep cycles in mammals and how different species adjust when daylight changes across seasons. It was normal, boring even, the kind of lecture where your brain floats above your body and you only catch every third sentence. Then he said something that didn't fit. As we all know, Davis droned, the human brain, unlike those of other primates, can function at homeostasis with only 30 minutes of sleep a night. On average, 30 minutes. My head lifted on its own like a string had been yanked. I blinked hard and stared at him. I was sure I'd misheard. Maybe, he said, 3 hours and my half-asleep brain grabbed the wrong number. But his face didn't change. He said it like it was obvious, like it was in every textbook. I looked up at the projector screen. There was a slide I had never seen before. And I don't mean I didn't pay attention. I mean it didn't look like anything from our lecture. It wasn't bears. It wasn't seasonal light. It wasn't diagrams of hibernation. It was a picture of a human head in cross-section, detailed and clean like a medical illustration. The brain and eyes were highlighted, but the part that made my stomach tighten was what was layered over it, a complex map of thin lines and arrows, like a second nervous system drawn on top of the first. The lines crossed and tangled in places, like someone had traced a city subway map directly onto the brain. It didn't look like any diagram I'd seen in class. It didn't even look like something you'd show undergrads at 8 in the morning. It looked too purposeful. Before I could fully take it in, Davis clicked his remote and the slide vanished. The next slide was exactly what it should have been. Bears. Seasonal patterns. Thick fur. Fat reserves. The safe, dull stuff. I sat there frozen, waiting for someone else to react. A laugh. A confused whisper. Someone turning to a friend and going, "What the hell was that?" Nobody did anything. I looked at the students around me. They were still half asleep. One guy was literally drooling on his sleeve. A girl 2 rows in front of me had her earbuds in and was tapping her pen like nothing happened. Not one person was staring at the screen or looking at Davis like he'd just said something insane. That was when a cold thought slid in. Maybe it really didn't happen. Maybe I did drift off for a second. Maybe I dreamed it, but I could still see the slide in my head, clear enough that it made my eyes sting. After class ended, people packed up fast. Chairs scraped, backpacks zipped. Davis gathered his things like he always did. I forced myself to walk down to the front while my legs felt oddly light, like I was moving through shallow water. "Professor Davis," I said, trying to sound casual like I wasn't shaking inside. "Can you explain that diagram again? The one with the human brain? Something about sleeping?" He paused, like he had to search through his memory. He said, "Which slide do you mean? We didn't cover anything about human sleep behaviors. It was just about different species of bears." I stared at him, waiting for the joke. Maybe he liked messing with students who looked too awake. But his brow was furrowed. He looked genuinely confused. "What about that one slide?" I insisted. "With the brain? You said something about how long humans sleep for." "Right." Davis gave me a slow smile, like I was a kid asking something silly. "No," he said. "I'm not sure what you mean. There definitely wasn't anything like that today. Maybe you were dreaming." He chuckled at his own joke. My mouth went dry. "Yeah," I managed, forcing a laugh that sounded wrong in my ears. "Maybe. I guess I'll just check the notes again when I get home." He laughed again as if that settled it. I walked out of the lecture hall with my skin prickling, like someone had just stepped too close behind me. Back in my dorm later, The first thing I did was open my laptop and pull up the PowerPoint. I clicked through every slide carefully. Bears, bear fat, bear sleep, bear habitats. There wasn't a single image of a human brain. There was no weird map of lines. Nothing even close. I checked the file name. Same one. I checked the date it was uploaded. Same one. I even downloaded it again, like maybe my version had glitched. Still nothing. For a few minutes, I just sat there staring at my screen, feeling stupid. Maybe I really did fall asleep. Maybe my brain inserted something strange into my memory because I was tired and bored and not paying attention. But that slide hadn't felt like a dream. It felt sharp. It felt placed. I tried to shrug it off. I ate dinner. I talked to my roommate. I watched a dumb video to distract myself. By late evening, I told myself I'd move on. Then, when I finally crawled into bed, I felt it. It started as a mild itch on my scalp, like dry skin. I scratched. It didn't help. The itch didn't feel like it was on my skin, though. It felt deeper, like something under the surface was irritated, like my skull was a shell, and something inside it was shifting against it. I lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. My body was tired, heavy in that good way that usually comes right before sleep. But my brain wouldn't settle. Thoughts kept skipping, racing, looping back around. I tried to shut them down, tried to do that thing where you focus on breathing. It didn't work. Hours passed. I checked my phone at one point, and it was after 3 a.m., then 4 o'clock. My eyes burned, but my mind stayed lit up, busy and restless like a motor that wouldn't turn off. By 6 a.m., I gave up. I sat up, rubbed my gritty eyes, and swung my legs over the side of the bed. My body felt exhausted, like I'd been awake for days, but my brain felt wired, alert, and irritated. I got dressed and dragged myself into the day. Tuesday was strangely normal. I was tired the whole time, but I could function. I went to my classes. I ate. I talked to people. My head hurt a little, but nothing dramatic happened. If someone had asked, I would have said, I just had a rough night. Still, the thought of Wednesday morning sat in the back of my mind like a stone. Comparative physiology. 8 a.m. Again. When night came, I tried even harder to sleep. I turned off my phone. I kept the room dark. I lay still. I didn't look at the clock. It didn't matter. My brain ran anyway, fast and stubborn, as if it had decided sleep was optional, and I didn't get a vote. When I finally gave up, I felt angry in a way that didn't match the situation. It wasn't normal frustration. It felt chemical, like my emotions had been turned up too high. I got dressed, moved through my morning like a ghost, and went to class. Davis started talking about mammal adaptations in humid environments. His voice was steady, boring. The slideshow matched. It was all normal for the first few minutes, and a tiny part of me relaxed. Then he looked up from the notes and said casually, "Of course, the human body tends to blink less when the individual is adapted for equatorial, humid environments. Like here." He glanced around the room while he said it, and his eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. It wasn't a friendly look. It wasn't even a neutral professor look. It felt like he was checking something. "The eye," he continued, "is able to function with practically no eyelids whatsoever, actually." My gaze snapped to the projector. The slide changed too fast. I only caught a hint of pale shapes and lines. Then he clicked again, and it was gone, replaced by something about sweat glands. My heart started to beat in my throat. I stared at the screen so hard my eyes began to sting. I was trying to prove to myself that I was awake, that I was seeing real things. I was trying to catch him doing it again. And that's when I realized something awful. I hadn't blinked. I didn't know how long it had been, but my eyes were wide and dry, and they felt like someone had poured sand under my eyelids. I tried to force a blink, the reflex that should have happened automatically. Nothing. My eyelids didn't move. It was like the command didn't exist anymore. My eyes started watering at the edges, but it wasn't relief. Tears gathered and couldn't spread properly. They clung to the corners and made my vision shimmer. I checked my watch with shaking hands. 8:46. I had looked up at the screen around 8:15, maybe earlier. That meant I had been staring, unblinking, for half an hour. That couldn't be right. People can't do that without trying. My eyes should have shut from reflex alone. I turned to the guy sitting next to me. He had his head down on his arms, asleep. I reached over and shook his shoulder. "Hey," I whispered harshly. "Did you see that slide about the human eye?" He lifted his head just enough to look annoyed. "What?" he mumbled. I wasn't really paying attention. Then he dropped his face back down like he was done being awake for the day. Panic started to rise in my chest, quick and hot. I looked around the room. Nobody else looked bothered. Nobody else's eyes were watering. Nobody else was staring in terror at their own eyelids, like they weren't working. I told myself again that I was losing it. But my eyes kept burning, and I still couldn't blink. When the clock hit 8:50, I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly. A few people glanced at me, annoyed. I didn't care. I walked to the front of the room, my legs shaking, my eyes stinging so badly it was hard to focus. Davis paused mid-sentence and looked at me. "Professor Davis," I said. My voice cracked from exhaustion. "How long does a human being need to sleep?" He blinked at me, confused. He said, "I'm not sure what you mean. 8 hours a night." He smiled for a second, but it faded when he really looked at my face. When he looked into my eyes. "If you're stressed about the midterm, you can come to my office hours." "No," I interrupted. "I mean, what you said today, about blinking, the eye, humidity." I gripped the edge of his desk because I felt like I might fall over. My stomach churned. Davis's expression shifted into something like concern, but it felt fake, like a mask he'd practiced. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked. "You look sick. You can go to student health." I turned away and walked out while he was still talking. I couldn't stand there another second. He wasn't going to help me. Either he didn't know what was happening, which felt impossible, or he did and was pretending. The rest of that day crawled. My eyes felt like hot metal. The tears dried out, leaving my vision brittle and blurred. My head ached. My thoughts felt scrambled. I tried to study for another class, but I couldn't focus. Words slid off the page and disappeared. The next morning, I bombed my exam. I could barely hold my pencil. My hands felt clumsy, like they were slightly delayed. By Thursday, people started acting strange around me. They avoided looking straight at my face. They answered me too quickly and then walked away. I caught people staring when they thought I wouldn't notice, their eyes flicking to mine and then darting away. I started to wonder if my eyes looked wrong, dry and wide and unblinking like some kind of doll. Friday morning came. 8 a.m. again. I felt like I'd been awake for a lifetime. I sat slumped at my desk, shoulders sagging, stomach hollow. Davis started talking about colonial organisms. The Portuguese man-o'-war, tentacles, how a colony can behave like one creature. I tried to stay focused because I was sure something was coming. My whole body felt tense, waiting. Then Davis pivoted. Just like the man-o-war, he said. Our bodies are in a close relationship with an organism. He clicked the remote. A new slide filled the screen. This time it stayed long enough for me to see it clearly. The title read, Filaria habitans. The image was a full map of the human nervous system, but layered beside it was another network. Tubes and lines spread through the body like a second system, branching everywhere. They seemed to gather into a thick core in the stomach, like a tumor made of bundled cords. Davis spoke calmly, like he was explaining something simple. This organism, he said, made up of 200 miles of tubes, originates within the stomach when we eat certain foods that contain its eggs. The core grows inside the host, contributing to the health of the gut microbiome until it reaches a certain size. As he talked, his face looked hollow, pale skin, dead eyes. His voice didn't rise or fall. It felt like listening to someone reading an instruction manual. I raised my hand without thinking. Davis pointed at me. Yes. What are you talking about? I said, louder than I meant to. What is this? This isn't real. Am I the only one paying attention? I turned and looked around the room. Nobody reacted. Not one person looked confused. Nobody whispered. Nobody laughed. They sat there like statues, staring forward, taking notes like they were hearing about bear fur again. Davis chuckled softly. They don't care, he said. They won't listen to you. My hands started shaking. I could feel my fingernails digging into the desk, but I couldn't stop. The pressure of it felt like the only thing anchoring me to reality. What's happening? I asked, my voice thin. Why can't I sleep anymore? Why can't I blink? That's when I noticed blood. My fingertips were slick, and I realized I'd cut my own skin by gripping the desk so hard. Davis leaned forward slightly, his jaw tight. It's inside you, he said, quiet but clear. Right now, it always has. When it reaches its apex, it will have to come out. I stared at him with my dry, distorted vision, trying to understand his words. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Then Davis straightened like nothing had happened. Anyways, he said, cheerful now in a fake way, let's move on. He clicked the remote again. The slide changed back to the man-o-war, like he hadn't just told me I had something living inside me. I didn't wait for class to end. I stood up and walked out. Halfway home, I felt it in my stomach. At first, it was just a heaviness. Then it became distinct, like something with edges. A mass, sitting deep in my gut, shifting slightly when I moved. The thought of it made bile rise in my throat. By the time I reached my dorm room, nausea hit me like a wave. My vision tilted. The floor felt too far away. I dropped to my knees and tried to breathe, but my throat kept tightening. I started dry heaving, harsh and painful. Each time my body tried to vomit, the mass inside me pushed upward, like it was riding the motion. My mouth filled with thick spit. I gripped the carpet so hard my knuckles went white. My stomach clenched again, harder than before, and something rose into my throat that was too large to be food. My throat stretched. It burned. My jaw cracked painfully as it forced wider than it should. Then it came out. It dropped onto the floor with a wet, heavy sound. I gasped and coughed, choking on sour bile and saliva. My eyes were streaming again, but this time it felt like relief, like my body was finally letting go. On the carpet in front of me lay a pale, veiny thing, roughly ball-shaped. It was coated in bile, glistening under my bedroom light. Thin white hairs covered it, tiny and dense, sticking out in all directions like soft needles. It didn't move. but it looked alive anyway, like it could move if it wanted to. I didn't touch it. I just sat there shaking, breathing hard, the taste of stomach acid in my mouth. And then, for the first time since that Monday morning, my eyes closed. They closed easily, naturally, like nothing was wrong. Darkness spread over me like a blanket. My body went loose. My mind finally stopped. I don't remember falling into bed. I don't remember anything after the carpet and the smell. I woke up 15 hours later. 15 hours of deep, heavy sleep. The kind that makes you forget your own name for a second when you open your eyes. The kind that resets your whole body. It was the best sleep I've ever had in my life. My eyes blinked, without me thinking about it. My scalp didn't itch. My brain felt quiet. But the room still smelled faintly sour, and when I looked at the floor, the stain on the carpet was still there. I'm writing this now because I'm scared that if I don't, I'll convince myself it was all a nightmare. I'll start doubting again. I'll start thinking maybe I fell asleep in class and imagined the slide and imagined Davis and imagined the feeling of something in my stomach. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt, and I can't stop thinking about that first slide, the one that wasn't in the PowerPoint. The map of lines over the brain, like something else was drawn on top of what we're supposed to be. Maybe if I hadn't looked up that day, none of this would have happened. Maybe if I'd stayed half asleep like everyone else, if I'd kept my head down, if I'd just let Davis talk about bears, I would still be normal. I keep thinking about the way he looked at me on Wednesday, like he was checking if I'd noticed, like he was waiting for a reaction. Maybe I was never supposed to notice. So if you're a student and you're sitting in a lecture hall at 8 in the morning and you feel your eyes drifting closed, maybe don't fight it so hard. Maybe it's okay to fall asleep in class sometimes. Maybe it's safer. Story 4. Long before the sky filled with smoke and the streets ran with fear, the world had been divided into 3 powerful realms. The humans ruled their shining cities of stone and steel. The elves guarded their ancient forests, where sunlight filtered through silver leaves, and time itself seemed to move more slowly. And beyond the mountains, in lands where the ground cracked and burned beneath a darkened sky, the demon lord Azazel ruled his shadowed empire. For generations, there had been tension between the realms, but hatred burned brightest in the heart of Azazel. His contempt for humans was deep and unshakable. He saw them as weak, greedy, and undeserving of the world they claimed. While the elves kept to themselves, humans had built kingdoms, raised banners, and called themselves masters of the land. That pride was something Azazel could not tolerate. The war began quietly, with whispers of disappearing villages near the borders. Then came the raids. Then came the fires. Human soldiers fought back bravely, but they were not prepared for the darkness that marched against them. Demonic armies did not tire. They did not fear death, and they did not show mercy. City after city fell. In the end, the last human stronghold stood alone, its tall white towers rising above the plains like a final act of defiance. It was here that King James and Queen Angelina ruled. They had once been symbols of hope, young, admired, and determined. They promised their people safety and unity. But promises mean little when darkness is at the gates. Azazel's forces surrounded the capital for weeks. Food ran out. Hope faded. The once proud banners that waved above the palace walls were torn and stained with ash. When the gates finally broke, the sound echoed through the city like the cracking of the world itself. The fighting inside the streets was brutal and short. Human soldiers were cut down where they stood. The palace doors were smashed open. By the time Azazel's army reached the throne room, the battle was already decided. King James had tried to defend the entrance himself. His armor was dented and broken. Blood ran from a wound near his temple. His sword slipped from his hand when he was struck from behind. He fell to his knees on the marble floor he once walked with pride. Queen Angelina was dragged from her chambers not long after. Now, under the harsh light of midday, the entire city had gathered to witness what came next. The noise of the crowd was overwhelming. It rose like a storm, loud and wild, filling every corner of the square. People pushed forward, eager to see the fallen rulers. Some came out of fear, others out of hatred, and many simply because they did not dare stay away. Queen Angelina was dragged into the open by 2 guards. Her once beautiful gown was torn and stained with dirt. Her face, once admired for its calm strength, was streaked with black mascara that had run down her cheeks like dark rivers. Her golden crown still sat on her head, though it had been placed there by her captors, not out of respect, but as a cruel joke. It shone brightly in the sun, mocking her suffering. Her hair was tangled and matted. Her hands were bound tightly in front of her, rope cutting into her skin. Every step she tried to take was forced. When she stumbled, the guards pulled harder, making her fall to her knees against the stone steps leading down from the palace. Beside her, King James was in even worse condition. He was barely recognizable. His knees were scraped raw from being dragged across the cobblestones. Blood covered his hands where he had tried to break his fall. His breathing was uneven and shaky. Guards kicked him whenever he slowed, forcing him to crawl forward like an animal. But what had been done to him was far worse than bruises. His bare skin was coated in thick black tar that clung to him heavily, shining under the sun. Feathers had been pressed into the sticky surface, plucked from chickens and forced against his body until they stuck. The sharp ends dug into his flesh. Where he struggled, they tore into his skin, leaving thin lines of blood that mixed with the dark tar. The smell in the air was unbearable. Burnt, tar, sweat, blood, and fear combined into something thick and choking. From the raised platform at the far end of the square, Azazel watched it all. He sat comfortably in a massive throne that had once belonged to the human kings. The throne seemed smaller beneath him, as though it no longer deserved to hold such power. Shadows curled around his tall frame. His eyes glowed faintly as he leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, observing the scene with clear enjoyment. To him, this was not just punishment. It was a message. The crowd's shouting grew louder as the former rulers were forced down the palace stairs. Step by step, they descended into the muddy streets below, the same streets where they once rode in golden carriages during festivals, the same streets where people once bowed as they passed. Now, those same people spat at them. Mud splashed against the queen's dress as she lost her footing again. She fell forward, her hands catching her weight just before her face struck the ground. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone threw a rotten piece of fruit. It hit her shoulder and slid down, leaving a stain. King James cried openly now, not the proud tears of a warrior, but broken, desperate sobs. His voice cracked as he tried to call out to his people, but no one answered. His words were swallowed by mocking cheers. They were forced forward toward the center of the square, where a wooden platform had been built. At the top stood the guillotine. Its blade gleamed in the sunlight. The queen's strength was nearly gone. When they reached the bottom of the palace steps, she collapsed completely. Her body hit the dirt hard. For a moment, she did not move. A guard grabbed her by the hair and pulled her head up roughly. The sudden pain brought her back to awareness. Her scalp burned as strands tore loose. She tried to stand, but her legs trembled violently beneath her. The earth beneath her felt cold and wet. She could taste dirt in her mouth, blood from a split lip mixed with it, metallic and sharp. Around them the crowd pressed closer. Faces leaned in. Hands reached out. King James was shoved forward again, falling beside her. The tar on his body made it difficult for him to move. The feathers stuck out at strange angles. A few members of the crowd began grabbing at them. At first, it was slow, curious fingers testing the strange sight. Then it became violent. People dug their hands into the tar, gripping the feathers and yanking them out. Each pull tore skin along with it. Blood followed. The king screamed, but his voice was drowned by laughter and cheers. His body jerked with every cruel tug. Feathers flew into the air, stained red at the tips. Azazel watched without blinking. The king's cries grew weaker. His body shook uncontrollably as more feathers were ripped away, leaving raw patches of torn flesh behind. The tar that once covered him now mixed with blood, forming dark streaks across his skin. The queen could barely lift her head to look at him, her vision blurred with tears and exhaustion. She tried to crawl toward him, but a guard kicked her sharply in the side, forcing her back down. The crowd no longer saw a king. They saw something less than human, something broken. The once proud ruler of the human kingdom was reduced to a trembling figure in the mud, stripped of dignity, piece by piece. Above it all, the sun continued to shine, bright and uncaring. The city that had once celebrated human strength now echoed with the sounds of humiliation and pain. What had begun as conquest had become a spectacle, and Lord Azazel, seated on the stolen throne of humanity, smiled as the last symbol of human hope was torn apart before him. Story 5. I was the lead on the call that evening. County Search and Rescue. Winter Response. I had been doing winter call-outs for 9 years by then. And after that long, you start to hear things in people's voices. You can tell when someone is mildly inconvenienced, and when someone is truly in trouble. It is not always what they say. It is how they say it. The pauses, the breathing, the way their voice shakes or speeds up without them realizing it. The call that came in that night sounded normal, calm, controlled, nothing urgent in the tone. If anything, it felt like a simple roadside assist. Dispatch logged it as 2 occupants stranded on an inland connector road. A snowdrift had blown across both lanes. Their vehicle was stuck nose first into it. The engine was still running. The heater was on. Fuel level was unknown. The caller did not use the word emergency. He did not raise his voice. There was no arguing in the background, no crying. He gave a clear location marker and answered questions directly. Any injuries? No. Any medical conditions? No. Were they in immediate danger? No. Routine. We were operating out of a small town in interior British Columbia. Winters there are not just cold, they are heavy. Snow does not fall gently and disappear. It builds, it blocks, it changes the landscape. Roads that look harmless during the day can become traps after dark. That afternoon, the team was me, Connor, Leah, and Jason. Connor had been with us 3 years. Steady, dependable, good under pressure. Leah was new, only in her 2nd month. She was sharp and eager, still learning the rhythm of winter calls. Jason and I had worked together since I joined the team. He drove most of our winter responses because he knew how to handle the truck on ice better than anyone. We rolled out just before 6 in the SAR truck, set up with recovery gear, tow straps, shovels, emergency blankets, and medical supplies. The main highway had already been plowed, but the inland connector road was a different story. It was narrower, untreated, and exposed to wind that pushed snow across it in long drifting sheets. The sky was low and heavy. It was not fully snowing, but fine flakes drifted sideways in the wind. The light was already fading. Out there, once the sun drops behind the trees, darkness settles fast and thick. Beyond the truck's headlights, the world disappears. We reached the coordinates at 6:20 p.m. The scene looked exactly like the caller had described. The road was empty in both directions. No other vehicles. No houses, no lights in the distance. Just open ground on one side and dense forest pressing close along the other. Ahead of us, two dull headlights glowed through blowing snow. The stranded car was stopped in the middle of the road, nose buried deep into a drift that had blown across both lanes. The snow was packed hard by wind. The front wheels were completely buried. The engine was still running. Exhaust rose steadily from the tailpipe. It was the only thing moving besides the snow. Jason parked behind them, leaving enough space for recovery work. When we stepped out of the truck, the wind hit immediately. It flattened sound and pulled heat away fast. Even small noises became hard to place. I walked up to the driver's side window and shined my flashlight inside. That was when they seemed to fully notice us. The man in the driver's seat glanced at me, then back at the road ahead. His hands were tight on the steering wheel. The woman in the passenger seat turned slightly, but kept looking past us, scanning the dark edges beyond our headlights. She was wrapped in her coat, shoulders tense, hands tucked under her arms. The heater was running hard enough that the windshield kept fogging and clearing in uneven patches. I tried the door handle. It did not move. The man made a few hand gestures through the glass, as if trying to explain something. I could not understand what he meant. Ice had sealed the door along the frame. I went back to the truck, grabbed an ice chisel, and worked along the seam. The ice cracked and fell away in thin pieces. When the door finally opened, heat spilled out into the cold air. I introduced myself and told them we would get them free and tow them back toward the main road. The man nodded once and thanked us. His voice was steady. The woman asked how long it would take. As she spoke, her eyes kept moving from one window to another. I told her we needed to clear space around the vehicle and secure a tow strap first. She nodded, but her attention was not really on me. I asked if either of them was injured. They both shook their heads. I asked if they had tried to dig out. Yes, earlier. I asked how long they had been stuck. The man paused before answering. A while, he said. Leia and Connor pulled shovels from the truck and started clearing snow from around the rear wheels and under the frame, so we could attach a strap safely. Jason radioed dispatch to check in and request a plow in case the drift was too dense for a straight pull. It was routine work. We had done it dozens of times. I stayed near the open driver's door and kept talking to the couple. The inside of the car smelled damp, fabric that had absorbed cold and held onto it. I asked about fuel again. The man said he was not sure. The fuel gauge had been unreliable since the deep cold started. The woman suddenly asked if we could leave right away. I told her we had to prepare the vehicle first. We could not just drive off. She nodded, but did not respond further. A few minutes later, Jason called out from the rear of the car. Leah and I walked over. He had brushed snow aside and was shining his light on the rear quarter panel. It was dented inward. The metal had folded sharply, and the paint had cracked along the crease. It did not look like damage from drifting snow. I walked back to the driver's side and asked what had happened. The man stared forward without answering. The woman spoke quietly. "It hit us." "What hit you?" I asked. She swallowed. "Something big." Connor stopped shoveling and looked at me. I asked where it came from. She gestured across the road, toward the open ground, then toward the darker wall of trees. It came out of the dark. We couldn't see it clearly. The man added, "It kept moving. We never got a full look at it." I suggested it might have been a bear. He shook his head. "No." I asked when it happened. "Right after we got stuck. It was getting dark," he said. I asked why they had not mentioned it on the initial call. He took a slow breath. "We weren't sure what it was. I think it hit us. After that, it's been moving around the car. We've been hearing it." "Hearing what?" I asked. That was when we heard it ourselves. A low growl. It came from the tree line where the road curved away. The sound was deep and heavy. It did not tell us how far away it was. Connor froze. Leah lifted her light toward the trees. Jason turned his head slowly. I swept my flashlight across the snow and into the first row of trunks. Nothing moved. Just trees and drifting snow. Then we heard something else. A slow, wet exhale. Branches shifted. Snow dropped from above and scattered onto the ground. The woman screamed inside the car. She started shaking violently. The man tried to calm her, but he kept staring into the darkness too. They had been sitting there alone for a long time, listening to that. I told everyone to stay close and keep lights up. I told Jason to bring the truck closer. I also called dispatch and requested backup. Something felt wrong. I did not want to take risks. Connor looked at me, waiting for direction. "We're leaving the car," I said. I turned back to the couple and told them to get out immediately. The woman moved first. She stepped out stiffly and almost slipped. Leah grabbed her arm and steadied her. The man stepped out slower, his head turning quickly, scanning the spaces between the trees. We formed a tight group and started moving toward the truck. The couple in the middle, Connor and Leah on either side. Me walking backward, flashlight wide. The growl came again, closer this time. A gust of wind brought the smell of wet animal fur. Strong and sharp, the truck was about 20 meters away. We picked up speed. The couple struggled in the snow. The man kept turning around until Connor pushed him forward firmly. Something heavy moved through the trees beside the road. Snow shifted under weight. Branches bent and snapped softly. It was moving at the same pace we were. Jason had the rear door open when we reached the truck. "Move," he shouted. Leah helped the woman inside and climbed in after her. Connor followed with the man. I got in last and slammed the door shut. Jason locked the doors and hit the horn. Something crossed in front of the headlights. It did not reflect light. It blocked it. A broad shape passed through the beam. We saw front limbs reaching forward, claws scraping ice briefly, a low head, a powerful body moving smoothly. Then, it was gone off the side of the road. Connor said quietly, "That's not a bear." The stranded car was still blocking the road ahead. Jason shifted into reverse and backed up carefully. He found enough space to turn where snow had been cleared earlier in the season. The truck swung around as our headlights moved away from the stranded car. Darkness swallowed it. Then we heard it, a slow, heavy sound. Metal under pressure, steel bending. It came from the direction of the car we had just left. Jason did not hesitate. He drove. As we moved down the road, we could hear something running through the trees beside us. Not directly behind, but keeping pace. Heavy footfalls, branches snapping. In the side window, I caught glimpses of movement between trunks. tall, fast, keeping even with us. The woman was crying quietly now. The man had twisted in his seat, staring through the rear window. I radioed dispatch and told them we were in motion and being followed. They confirmed backup was close. The trees thinned briefly along an open stretch. For a few seconds, we saw more of it. A long shape running low to the ground, shoulders rising and falling, front limbs long, striking ahead of the body before pulling it forward. It moved almost like an ape, but larger, much larger. It was not struggling to keep up. We saw pale fur catch the headlights once before it disappeared back into shadow. When the backup unit's headlights appeared ahead of us, relief hit hard. As the two trucks stopped facing each other, both sets of headlights lit up the road and the trees at once. That was when it stepped out. It rose onto its hind legs, just beyond the tree line. It was taller than our truck by a clear margin, close to 9 feet. Thick, pale fur covered its body. One long arm lifted to shield its eyes from the glare. The other hung low, ending in large hands tipped with claws. Its chest was broad, its shoulders heavy with muscle. It let out a deep growl that rolled across the road. For a few seconds, we all just stared. Then it dropped back down onto all fours and ran into the trees with shocking speed. The other truck fired a flare into the forest. The white light illuminated branches bending and snow falling as something large pushed deeper into the woods. Then it was gone. We did not stop driving until we reached town. The couple were taken inside, given blankets, and hot drinks. The man said the worst part had been waiting in the dark, hearing it move around the car. At first light, another team went back with a plow. The car was still there, but damaged. The doors were bent outward. The rear bumper showed deep, uneven grooves, as if something with weight had gripped and pulled. Several young trees nearby were bent or snapped. Bark was torn from one trunk at shoulder height. There were no clear tracks. Wind had erased most of the ground by morning. Back at the station, we did not try to explain what we saw. No one joked. No one speculated out loud. We just adjusted how we worked. On night calls after that, we staged vehicles with room to escape. We kept backup closer. We moved faster. We did not stand around in the dark anymore. Story 6. Mondays always felt the same to me. My alarm would go off, and I'd lie there for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, already tired. College wasn't treating me well. It wasn't even the classes that got me. It was the routine, the pressure, the way every day felt like I was dragging myself through it. Still, I did what I always did. I got up, took a shower, brushed my teeth, got dressed, and headed out. Most mornings I'd swing by my girlfriend's place to pick her up before school. It was simple, normal, the kind of normal I needed. That normal started changing after my mom bought our new house. It was close to a farm field, the kind with tall grass that grows wild and thick at the edges. During the day, it looked harmless, just plants moving in the breeze. But at night, it didn't feel like a field anymore. It felt like a wall, like something deep and quiet was hiding in it. Every time I looked out my bedroom window, I got this strange feeling, like the tall grass was watching me. I tried to laugh it off. I told myself it was just stress and a new environment. Farmers worked those fields. People drove past them every day. There was no way something was living out there like some kind of story. But my mind didn't care what made sense. Sometimes, when I'd drive past the field at night, I'd get the same thought again and again. What if I suddenly get pulled out of my car? What if I blink and I'm not on the road anymore? What if I'm standing in the middle of that grass with no idea how I got there? Just imagining it made my chest tighten. The road beside the field was long and straight. At night, the streetlights were spaced far apart, so far that I could barely see the next pole ahead. Each time I passed one, my heart would jump like something was waiting in the gap between lights. A drive that should have taken 3 minutes felt like an hour, because my brain kept making up shapes in the dark. I kept telling myself it was nothing. I kept telling myself it was just tall grass. Those thoughts stayed as thoughts until the night they didn't. That was the night I will never forget. A few of my old high school friends wanted to see the new house. I hadn't seen them in a long time, so I agreed. At first, the night was actually good. We talked, laughed, brought up old memories, even got into some emotional stuff. The kind of conversations you only have when you've known people long enough to drop the act for a while. Then, without thinking, I said something I still regret. I told them I was scared of the fields. One of them laughed hard, like I'd told the funniest joke in the world. "Dude," he said, "you're scared of a bunch of plants?" I told them living next to something like that, seeing it every day, can mess with your head. It can make you imagine things you can't stop. I was trying to say it felt creepy, that it got under my skin, that it made me think about stuff I didn't want to think about. That was my mistake, because the second I said it out loud, one of them got excited. "Let's go check it out," he said. I said no immediately. "Bro, why would you even go in there at this time?" I asked. "It's like 8 p.m. It's pitch black in the fields." He shrugged. "We won't take long. I just want to see it myself." The others backed him up, not even because they believed something was there, but because they wanted a little thrill, and I could already feel the pressure building. If I said no again, I'd be the joy killer, the boring one, the scared one. So I gave in. We had flashlights, 4 of us total. I kept repeating the same thought in my head like a prayer. We're just going to look and leave. We won't be there long. It won't take long. We stood in front of the field, and the moon was out. It wasn't even bright, but it was enough to make the tall grass shine faintly at the top, like it had a silver edge. It felt wrong, like the moon was watching us walk towards something we didn't understand. My skin prickled as we got closer. One of my friends laughed and said, "Hey, we're going in here. Don't chicken out." I wanted to say no so badly. I wanted to tell them to forget it. But I didn't. I nodded, forced a smile, and stepped into the field with them. The grass swallowed us fast. It was taller than I expected, brushing my shoulders, scratching my arms through my hoodie. The deeper we walked, the less I could see of the road behind us. My flashlight beam cut narrow tunnels through the grass, and everything outside that beam was just black. I could hear bats overhead, quick fluttering sounds. Crickets chirped steadily in the ground. My friends kept laughing, talking like we were on some harmless adventure. "See," one of them said, "there's nothing out here. No reason to be scared." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as soon as he said it, the laughter faded, not slowly. It stopped, like someone had hit a switch. One of my friends pointed his light down and said, "Yo, what is that?" On the ground, half buried in dirt and weeds, was a dog bone. It was old and pale, but still looked wrong lying there like that, like something had left it. He made a joke, because that's what he always did. "Ooh, dude. Disgusting," he said, laughing. "I'll give you $5 to take it home. LOL. We stared at him for a second, just to mess with him, but before anyone could laugh again, the crickets stopped. The silence hit so hard it felt physical. Then clouds moved across the moon, and the little bit of light we had disappeared. It became pitch black. The only light was from our phones. I felt my stomach drop. "This is dumb," I said. "We should head back." But they didn't listen. They insisted we go further. Just a little more. Just enough to say we did it. And for some reason, I gave in again. I followed them, even though every part of me was screaming to turn around. We walked deeper. And that's when one of my friends suddenly yelled, "Hey, stop pushing me." We were only a couple feet apart. "Dude, no one's touching you," another friend said, annoyed. But I knew what he meant, because I felt it too. Not a hand, not a shove, just pressure. Like something was behind us, close enough that we could feel it. I tried to tell myself it was paranoia, that we were scaring ourselves because it was dark, because we were already nervous. But it wouldn't go away. That feeling kept crawling up my spine. Then a branch snapped to our right. All of us stopped at the same time. "Hey," one of my friends shouted. "Someone there?" He took a step toward the sound like an idiot, and I grabbed his arm and pulled him back hard. "Something is in there," I whispered. He looked at me like I was overreacting. "This isn't a joke," he said. "Stop being scared." Then we heard it, running, far at first, but fast. All of our heads snapped toward it. The sound got closer in seconds, like whatever it was didn't have to search, like it already knew where we were. We didn't talk anymore. We turned and ran. The tall grass slapped my face as I sprinted. It felt like hands, cold and wet against my cheeks. My feet hit uneven ground. I nearly tripped twice. We ran and ran, but it felt like we weren't moving. "What the heck?" one of my friends screamed. We're not even that far in. That's what terrified me most. The entrance should have been right there, but it wasn't. The field didn't feel like a field anymore. It felt endless, like the grass had shifted around us, like it was guiding us deeper instead of letting us out. The sound was behind us, and then it wasn't just behind us. It was on both sides, too. Grass moved where no one was running. The tall stalks shook and bent like something was gliding through them, keeping pace, circling us. I looked over my shoulder for half a second, and I saw it. A tall figure, moving through the grass without stumbling, without effort. It didn't run like a person. It didn't even run like an animal. It moved like it was sliding. "Dude, what is that?" I screamed. "Whatever you do, don't look behind you." One of my friends dropped his phone. He slowed down to grab it, and I shouted at him not to. "Don't pick it up, just run." We kept going, lungs burning, legs shaking, and finally, we broke out of the grass and hit the edge of the road. We collapsed near the entrance, gasping for air. For a moment, there was nothing. No footsteps, no movement, just silence. Then the crickets started chirping again, like someone had turned the world back on. The clouds moved away. The moonlight returned. My friends started talking all at once, trying to explain it, trying to pretend it didn't happen. But I couldn't speak. I was staring at the field because I saw it. In the moonlight, just beyond the edge of the grass, something lowered its head and looked at me. I have never felt fear like that in my life. We went back to my house shaking, talking fast, tripping over words. "You were right," one of them said. "There is something in those fields. I'm never coming back here." I told everyone to drink water, to sit down, to calm down. That's when the friend who dropped his phone started panicking. "Dude, he said. I dropped my phone. My mom is going to kill me. I told him the truth. Buy a new one. We're not going back there. But he shook his head, eyes wide. It's not the phone, he said. My mom's bank stuff is on it. Her password. She has short-term memory loss. If I don't get it back, I'm in serious trouble. That's when I snapped. Dude, we are not going back there, I shouted. Call your mom and tell her it was your stupid idea in the first place. He went quiet after that. None of us slept. We just sat around, lights on, listening for sounds outside, trying to convince ourselves it was over. At some point, I must have dozed off without realizing it, because the next thing I remember is waking up thirsty. The house was dark. The clock said midnight. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and drank half of it in one go. My hands were shaking. My mouth tasted dry, like fear had left dust on my tongue. As I stood there, I heard something outside. A soft rustling sound. My clothes were hanging outside to dry. I'd left them out there earlier so I could wear them the next day. The sound was like someone gently touching fabric, letting it slide through their fingers. I walked toward the window. Slowly, I looked out into the yard, and I saw a shadow. It was moving toward my window. I froze so hard it felt like my bones locked. The shadow moved close. Then a finger, something long, tapped the glass. One tap, then another. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. My window was tinted. It couldn't see me. Or at least, I hoped it couldn't. The shadow drifted back, smooth and quiet, and disappeared toward the field. I ran back and woke my friends up, whispering like my voice might bring it back. It came here, I told them. It tapped my window. One of my friends stared at me with dead eyes and said, I've had enough for today. I just want to rest. I sat down, trying to breathe. Inhale, exhale. It's nothing. You saw nothing. Then my phone rang. My friend was calling me. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like falling. He was sleeping right there. How could he be calling me? The screen lit up again. FaceTime. I stared at it like it was a bomb. The call dropped. Then it called again. I woke the others and pointed at my phone. It's calling, I said. One of my friends answered. The FaceTime connected. We saw my house, but not from a normal angle, not from a person standing in the yard. The camera view was high, like 15 feet above the ground, tilted downward. We heard breathing, hard, slow breathing, like something was holding the phone close to its face. My friend shouted, Give me my phone back. A voice answered. It was his voice. Want it back? It said. Come and get it. We ended the call. My friend sat down, shaking so badly the couch cushions moved under him. It has your voice. I said. It copied your voice. After that, it kept calling. Again and again and again. None of us answered. We just watched the screen light up, vibrate, go dark, then light up again. Morning took forever. The calls finally stopped around 5 a.m. Nobody had slept. I told them we should call the police. They said no. One would believe us. They said even if officers checked the field, they wouldn't see anything. They wouldn't find the phone. And then we'd be the weird kids, making up stories. One of my friends tried to sound brave and said, What if we go in the daytime? Monsters only come out at night, right? Then the friend who dropped his phone stood up. I'm going back there, he said. What? Someone snapped. Dude, are you crazy? That thing is in there. We tried to stop him, but he ran out the door before anyone could grab him. And the worst part is, none of us followed. We were too scared. Time passed slowly after that. Every minute felt thick. I kept imagining him walking into the field alone. I kept thinking about that voice, that camera angle, that tapping on the window. I kept picturing the tall grass moving, like something was swimming through it. My phone alarm went off. I looked at the time, and my stomach tightened again. It was already 5 p.m., and he still hadn't come back. I couldn't take it anymore. I told my friends I was going to look for him. They tried to argue, but their voices sounded weak. They didn't really want to stop me. They just didn't want to be left alone with their guilt. I grabbed my bike and rode toward the field. The closer I got, the more my hands shook on the handlebars. The field looked normal in daylight, and that somehow made it worse. Like it was pretending, like it was waiting. I stopped at the edge and called his phone. Nothing. No ringing. Just silence. The air moved softly. Crickets chirped. Everything looked calm, like nothing terrible had ever happened there. I didn't want to go in, but he had gone in, without hesitation. So I forced myself. I turned on my flashlight even though it was still bright out. I don't know why. Maybe part of me wanted that narrow tunnel of light, something I could control. I walked into the grass again, calling his phone over and over. Nothing. I thought about yelling his name, but fear caught my throat. What if it heard me? What if it copied my voice too? What if it answered back like him? So I stayed quiet and kept walking. Then I heard something, a soft shh sound, grass shifting. To my right, far but clear enough that my skin went cold. I walked faster, still calling, still listening, until the smell hit me. At first it was faint, like wet soil left too long in the heat. Then it got stronger, sweet, rotting, warm. It crawled into my nose and stayed there, making my throat tighten. I swallowed hard to keep from gagging. The air felt humid around whatever was ahead, like the ground was breathing. My flashlight flickered, not dying, just stuttering. Dim, bright, dim, bright. Like it couldn't decide whether to show me the truth. That's when I saw the flies. At first, they looked like dust in the beam, but they moved in slow circles. Their wings flashed like tiny silver sparks. The sound came next, a low buzzing that never stopped, like a machine running somewhere out of sight. Then I saw him. My friend's body was up there, tied to a scarecrow post, like someone had hung him as a warning. He swayed gently, back and forth, back and forth. No wind, no reason, just movement. The rope creaked softly. His head hung forward in a way that didn't look human anymore, like his neck couldn't hold itself up, like he was listening even though he couldn't. And tied against his hand, wrapped in grass, was his phone. The screen was lit, cold blue light glowing against the dark mess of flies and rope and tall grass. It made his fingers look raw, like bones under wet skin. The phone vibrated. Once. Then again, buzzing mixed with the flies. My name appeared on the screen, and the light from the phone wasn't steady. It pulsed slightly, like it was breathing. Then I heard grass moving again. Closer. The phone rang again. Closer. I held my breath and muted my own phone so it wouldn't make a sound. The tall figure appeared in front of my friend's body, like it had been there the whole time, just hidden by the grass. It reached down and answered the phone. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I told myself, if I stayed perfectly still, it wouldn't hear me. It wouldn't see me. Then its head turned slowly toward my direction, and it smiled, wide, from ear to ear. My legs moved before my brain did. I ran. I ran so hard my lungs felt like they were tearing. He's gone, I whispered to myself as I cried. It killed him. Behind me it laughed. Not a random laugh. My friend's laugh. It copied him perfectly. It laughed like it was enjoying a joke. Only it understood. I sprinted through the grass, crashing through stalks, not caring where I stepped. I burst out of the entrance, grabbed my bike, and pedaled like my life depended on it. I thought I escaped. I was wrong. As I rode, I snapped a picture without looking back, just holding the phone out while I pedaled, hoping to catch proof. I didn't have time to turn around, but in the corner of the screen, I saw it. It was crawling on all fours, fast, low, closing distance. My heart dropped so hard I thought I'd pass out. I pedaled until my legs felt numb. I wanted to scream and throw up at the same time. I forced my body to keep going until I reached my house. When I finally looked back, it was gone. Like it had never been there at all. I stumbled inside and told my friends what I saw. I told them it killed him. They went pale. Someone started crying. Someone else kept whispering no, 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 like repeating it could change reality. We called the police. They arrived fast, lights flashing, voices calm and professional. They searched the area. They went to the field. They walked the edge. They shined lights. They found nothing. We tried calling the phone. Nothing. No ringing. No trace. It was like it knew exactly when to hide. Like it knew how to erase itself when humans showed up. His parents came to the station later. I can still remember the way his mom looked, begging, shaking, asking the same question over and over, like the answer might appear if she repeated it enough. Where is my son? Weeks turned into months. The case stayed open until one day it didn't. They said the search was going nowhere. They said there was nothing else they could do. I attended the funeral, even though there wasn't really anything to bury. Standing there felt like swallowing glass. I kept thinking about how it started as a joke, how I told them I was scared, how I let them convince me to go inside, how one stupid night turned into something permanent. I begged my mom to move. At first she thought I was just traumatized, just panicking. Then I showed her the photo I took while I was running. I will never forget the fear in her eyes when she saw it. 4 months later, we moved out. Even now, in a different place, with different streets and different windows, I still feel it sometimes. I still wake up at night and think I hear tapping. I still catch myself staring at tall grass on the side of roads. I've tried to cope. I've talked to professionals. I've told myself it wasn't my fault, that we didn't know, that we were kids who made a bad decision. But deep down, the truth doesn't change. We shouldn't have gone in. And no matter where I live now, a part of me still believes something is moving out there in the fields, waiting for someone else to make the same mistake. Story 7. Back in 2016, my life changed in a way I never expected. It started with something so small, something so ordinary, that it still feels unreal. A candle was knocked over by accident. That was it, just one careless moment. Within minutes, that tiny flame turned into something unstoppable. Fire spread through our home faster than I could process what was happening. The smoke filled every room. The heat became unbearable. I remember shouting for my wife and my 13-year-old son, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. By some miracle, we all made it out alive. No burns, no serious injuries, just fear and shock. But when we stood outside and watched our house burn, we knew everything inside was gone. Photos, furniture, clothes, memories built over years, reduced to blackened ash in a single night. We stayed at an apartment complex in downtown Florida for the next few months. It felt strange living out of boxes, surrounded by white walls that didn't feel like ours. Insurance gave us the option to rebuild the house exactly as it was. But my wife and I talked about it late one night and decided maybe this was a sign to start fresh. Maybe we could find something better, something bigger, something that felt like a new beginning instead of a reminder of what we lost. After about 4 months, my wife found a listing online. It was a beautiful home on the outskirts of Florida. Large, modern, peaceful looking. The photos showed wide windows, tall ceilings, polished wooden floors. It looked perfect. There was an open house scheduled just a few days later, so we decided to go see it before making any decisions. The day of the open house, we arrived early. In fact, we were the first ones there. The street was quiet. No cars parked outside. No other families waiting to go in. It was just us. The front door opened before we even knocked. The realtor stood there smiling. The first strange thing I noticed was that there was no car in sight. No vehicle in the driveway. No car parked down the street. Nothing. He was just there. I brushed it off. Maybe someone dropped him off. Maybe he lived nearby. It wasn't enough to make me question anything at that moment. He was a skinny, middle-aged man with orange hair and tattoos that ran down his arms. He had a polite smile, but there was something slightly awkward about him. His movements felt stiff, like he was trying too hard to appear friendly. He invited us in and began showing us around. The living room was stunning. High ceilings, large windows that let in soft, natural light. The kitchen was modern and spacious. Every room looked freshly cleaned and carefully arranged. My son loved it immediately. I could see the excitement on his face. He was already imagining where his gaming setup would go. But my wife was quiet. As the realtor walked ahead of us, she leaned close to me and whispered that something felt wrong. She said the house had bad energy. She couldn't explain it, but she didn't like it. I told her she was probably just still stressed from everything that happened with the fire. It had been a rough year. I figured nerves were normal. The realtor showed us bedroom after bedroom, each one larger than the last. The house felt massive, almost too big. Eventually, he led us into an empty room near the back of the house. It had bare walls and no furniture at all. "This can be used for storage," he said, smiling, "or whatever you want." Something about the way he paused before saying that made me uncomfortable. Then I noticed another door inside that empty room. A plain wooden door. Closed. He completely ignored it. I waited a moment, expecting him to explain it. But he just stood there smiling at us. "And what about that door?" I asked. He froze for a split second. "Oh," he said quickly, "that's off limits. You can't go in there." I laughed lightly, thinking he was joking. "What do you mean we can't go in there? If we're buying the house, we should be able to see every room." His expression changed. The friendly smile faded. His eyes widened slightly. He looked irritated. "If you want the house," he said slowly, "you won't open that door. If you don't, then you can leave." The way he said it wasn't normal. It wasn't professional. It was a warning. I felt frustration building inside me. But at the same time, I didn't want to lose this house. It was perfect in every other way. "Why?" I asked. His eyes locked onto mine. They looked intense. Too intense. For a second, I felt genuinely scared. "Just leave it alone," he said. The tension in the room felt heavy. My wife squeezed my hand tightly. "All right," I said finally. "We won't open it." Almost instantly, his face softened again. The awkward smile returned like nothing had happened. "Great," he said. "Well, that wraps things up." He led us out of the house and asked if we wanted to move forward with the purchase. My wife gave me a look that clearly said no, but I ignored it. I said yes. It's a decision I regret more than anything. We signed the paperwork. Over the next few days, we packed our things while he prepared the house for us. About a week later, we officially moved in. The first few months were quiet, too quiet. I thought about that door often. Every time I walked past that empty room, I felt drawn to it, curious, but I kept my word. We started hearing strange noises occasionally. Soft sounds at first, light banging, knocking, sometimes what sounded like metal scraping. We told ourselves it was the house settling, old pipes, air ducts. But deep down, we knew where the sounds were coming from. My son's bedroom was right next to that empty room. He began complaining about the noises more than we did. "Dad," he said one morning, "I heard banging last night and something scraping metal." I told him it was nothing, just normal house sounds. He didn't look convinced. Months passed. The noises continued. Sometimes they were faint. Sometimes they were loud enough to make us pause mid-conversation. About 7 months after we moved in, everything changed. It was the middle of the night. I woke up to use the bathroom. As I walked down the hallway past my son's room, I heard it. Loud metal scraping. Much louder than before. It wasn't distant. It was right there. Coming from behind that door. My heart started racing. Slowly, I walked toward the empty room. Each step felt heavier than the last. I stood in front of the door and pressed my ear against it. What I heard still haunts me. A man's voice, laughing, mumbling to himself. There were wet sounds, thick, sticky sounds, and metal scraping again, like something sharp dragging across a hard surface. I froze. Completely. It was that type of fear where your body stops responding, where you feel like if you move even an inch, something terrible will happen. I felt like whoever was behind that door would hear me breathing. The sounds continued for about a minute. Then suddenly they stopped. Completely. No laughter, no scraping, nothing. The silence was worse. It took everything in me to step away from the door. When I finally did, I rushed back to our bedroom and woke my wife. I told her everything. She looked more terrified than I had ever seen her. My son overheard us talking and came out of his room. He was shaking. That was it. We didn't debate. We didn't question it. We packed some essentials and left immediately. We drove straight to a hotel. I tried calling the realtor. His number was disconnected. I searched for his social media. Gone. It was like he never existed. I dug deeper online and found public records. He had been arrested multiple times for violent offenses, aggravated assault, battery. He had spent 8 years in prison for assaulting his wife. After his release, his wife went missing in 2011. I called the police and told them everything. The next day, we got a call that I will never forget. Behind that door were stairs leading down into a hidden basement. Inside that basement were the mutilated remains of 6 victims who had gone missing between 2011 and 2015. The realtor was found asleep on a mattress behind another hidden door within the basement. There was a small kitchen setup, a television, basic living supplies. He had been living under the house, directly beneath us, while we slept. One of the victims was his ex-wife. The others were previous homeowners who had bought the house after his release. He admitted to everything. He said he killed his ex-wife first. Then he killed the next 5 homeowners because they opened the door after he told them not to. If someone followed his rule, he let them live. He was convicted of 6 counts of first-degree murder and torture. He received life in prison without parole. He died in 2204 from lung cancer. But that doesn't bring peace, because sometimes, late at night, I still hear those sounds in my head. The wet noises, the metal scraping, the quiet laughter. He was cutting and dismembering bodies, while my family and I slept above him. And I often wonder what would have happened if I had opened that door on the first day. Would we have been added to that list? Would my wife have been right beside those other victims? Would my son? Thankfully, we will never know. But I learned something from all of this. If someone you love says something feels wrong, listen to them. If a house feels off, leave. Sometimes bad energy isn't just a feeling. Sometimes it's a warning. And sometimes it's the only thing standing between you and a door that should never be opened.